Hey everyone. If I have said this once, I have said it 1,000 times. Science is not neutral. It is a commodity that can be bought and sold, and it often reflects the biases of the time. For example, it used to be a scientific fact that white people were superior to black people. It used to be a scientific fact that men were superior to women. And it used to be a scientific fact that being gay was a mental disorder. Now, I think it's kind of foolish, although you can disagree with me, if we assume that we've made such tremendous mistakes in the past in terms of what we determined was science, but that's all in the past, and we're good now. I mean, we really have a solid idea of what science is now. I think we have some deeper work to do, and that is the nature of science. In order to make truly scientific choices about our health, we have to examine the historical, political, financial, and cultural biases at play. I learned this about 8 years ago when I healed myself from an incurable autoimmune disease using nutrition. I was diagnosed with this life-threatening autoimmune disease when I was 14, and over the next few years, I tried medication after medication, but the meds kept failing me, and my health got progressively worse. And eventually I realized that my health got worse because I was using a pharmaceutical approach, because I was treating the symptoms instead of actually addressing the underlying problems. And what saved me was I started researching, and I dug up scientifically backed dietary protocols and information on nutrition that wasn't mainstream, but it was supported by a lot of thorough research. And so my doctors told me that nutrition wouldn't work, but I listened to this one last whisper of my intuition saying, "You've got to try this, Lauren." And I did. And within 3 days, my acute symptoms were gone, and within 3 months, I had quit all my meds, and I was really healthier than I had ever been. The key here is that I had to find information that wasn't available on the first page of Google, and that wasn't told to me by my doctors even. So the truth is rarely available on the first page of Google. I want you to consider if we lived in the 1950s and Google existed, and you put into the search box, "Are cigarettes safe?" The search results might look something like headlines saying, "Doctors recommend Camel cigarettes," or "Debunking the cancer and cigarette conspiracy theory," or "Top researchers confirm cigarettes are safe." About 5 years ago, my health website, Empowered Sustenance, was getting millions and millions and millions of hits a year. And then, quite suddenly, my readership dropped off. And the organic search reach that I was getting through Google decreased very significantly. And I was quite puzzled about this, and I talked to some of my colleagues who also had health websites, and they were experiencing the same thing, all about the same time period. And what had happened was Google made an algorithm shift where it was promoting on the first page, or showing on the first page of search results, more websites like WebMD, these quote evidence-backed health sources, instead of our pages from our websites that had ranked so high before. Even though, our articles were thoroughly research-based, they were well-cited, but Google decided what it wanted to show to the public and what it wanted to bury. This was just the tip of the iceberg, because now I am seeing my colleagues get censored on social media, and I'm experiencing it myself to a degree that I could have never imagined. So one of my colleagues had his Instagram account of over 100,000 followers deleted overnight because he was sharing medical data and quoting in the trenches doctors that didn't comply with the mainstream narrative. So his Instagram account got taken down. And then I had another colleague who had her Facebook ad account completely deactivated overnight because she was sharing on her Facebook page products that helped with, I'm going to spell this word out for you, VACCINES, detox. So detoxing from the chemicals in those pharmaceuticals. And Facebook just decided that they didn't want to advertise her products anymore. I could give you so many more examples of this, but suffice it to say that in order to be truly healthy in today's world, we often have to dig a little deeper than what's available on the first page of Google. I'm going to get a little bit spiritual on you for a second. When I was 22, this book, Gilead, changed my life. So at that point in my life, I had a series of very unexpected and tumultuous spiritual awakenings where my perception of reality had been completely shattered over and over. And it was pretty distressing. And what I really struggled with at that time was the religious beliefs that I had grown up with, and even the scientific beliefs that were so important to me. I was very religious and intellectual, and I had fit reality into this nice, tidy little box. And then I had these palpable experiences that showed me, oh my goodness, that box is a complete illusion. The box doesn't even exist. And I was scrambling for a moment there, and I was really struggling with how do I move past some of my religious beliefs, even though my spiritual connection is so important to me and my spiritual life is so important to me. And then I read in this book that the narrator of the book says, "The Lord absolutely transcends any understanding I have of him, which makes loyalty to him a different thing entirely from loyalty to whatever customs and doctrines and memories I happen to associate with him." And so that allowed me to realize, my true loyalty here isn't to the doctrines or the old beliefs that I've associated with God due to my religion. My true loyalty is to my relationship with God and my relationship with the divine. And I share this because in the very, very same way, we need to apply this thinking to our scientific perspective. We need to ask ourselves, is our loyalty to the doctrines and the customs and the memories that we have associated to science? Or is our loyalty to science itself, which absolutely transcends our current understanding? But do we have that loyalty in continuing to learn and continuing to broaden our understanding of how the universe works? For example, materialism is a doctrine of science. Materialism suggests that all of reality can be measured, and it is matter. In this paradigm, souls aren't scientific because they're not something we can measure. This paradigm is also super duper condescending to all indigenous worldviews because it says that there is no spiritual dimension and there's no such thing as communicating with nature. So it really breeds a high degree of arrogance and condescension towards ancestral wisdom. And what a lot of scientists are now realizing is this is just an old doctrine, and there's a lot of scientific research and data now that shows materialism isn't real and suggests that the underpinning of reality is actually energy and consciousness. Some people are staying stuck. They have their loyalties with this old doctrine, and they're not really able to move forward with scientific progress. But then there are other leading scientists who are realizing, oh wow, we need to change and widen our perspectives here. And a lot of them actually authored and signed this fantastic piece called a manifesto for a post-materialist science. You can Google that, it will actually show up, and it's a great piece. And they're really showing what it's like to remain loyal to the progress of science. So if we truly value science, if we're truly loyal to the scientific worldview, then that means we have to identify the kind of censorship that's going on around information. We have to identify the funding bias in research. We have to identify the political bias. We have to identify the pharmaceutical bias. And we also have to stop labeling and categorizing people in order to disregard the data and the information that they're presenting. We actually have to avoid personal attacks and just look right at the data and the information. I've written many blog posts on all those issues, so I'll link some of them here if you want to do a deeper dive and see some examples and historical patterns. And then another resource for you is my book, The Invisible Corset. This is available for pre-order right now at invisiblecorset.com from all major booksellers, and it's out in January. And a big piece that I discuss in here is how the limited scientific worldview has actually disconnected women from our intuition and from our body's wisdom, and how we can learn from indigenous perspectives that didn't adhere to this kind of materialistic and reductionistic perspective of modern science. Right now, I want to do a deeper dive into this movement of labeling people as conspiracy theorists instead of keeping the discussion on the grounds of science, which is, what is the data? What is the facts? What is the research? So it's actually very, very unscientific to label people and to categorize them and to make personal attacks. Science doesn't deal with any of that. Science deals with, what is the data here? What are the different perspectives? What is the empirical research? This practice of putting people into categories in order to automatically dismiss or vilify them, this is one of the oldest and most effective propaganda techniques. And a lot of people fall into this pattern without realizing that's what they're doing, because it's very insidious and it's just kind of the zeitgeist of the culture right now. But this propaganda technique is used by cult leaders, it's used by fundamentalist religious leaders, by politicians, and also by academia and science. Some people think that anti-vaxxers or conspiracy theorists are the biggest threat to science right now. No. The biggest threat to science is, and has always been, arrogance. This belief that we have the right data or the right perspective or the right methodology, and what it does is it prevents us from learning. It puts us into a state of fear and defensiveness rather than curiosity. Ignorance, not arrogance, is the engine that drives scientific and medical progress. Marcello Gleaner is a physicist at Dartmouth College. I love his quote. He says, "Science was not designed to give us all the answers. In fact, science thrives on ignorance. We need to not know in order to create new knowledge." I also love the work of Dr. Stuart Firestein. He's the chair of biological sciences at Columbia University, and I have quoted his book many, many times. He's written this incredible book called Ignorance: How It Drives Science. It takes a lot of humility and courage and self-esteem to entertain the thought, this is what I believe, but I could be entirely wrong. I believe that the greatest scientists who have ever walked the earth, they embodied that mentality, and that is what I strive to embody as well. And this is also why it is so important to have access to all of the scientific data and to all of the scientific opinions and the medical opinions and the medical experience that is out there right now, because we need to have open debate and we need to have differing opinions in order to see the bigger picture, in order to recognize our blind spots, and in order to stay rooted in ignorance instead of arrogance. That's how science moves forward, and that's how medicine and healthcare and well-being moves forward. I made this video not to give you answers. I made it to prompt some questions. Questions like, what is some of the information that I'm not getting access to? How is information being hidden from me? What are some of the ways that the scientific information that I am seeing is being shaped by invisible forces? How can I embody a mentality that is truly more scientific and embraces ignorance rather than arrogance? And perhaps most importantly, how can I be more loyal to science itself rather than the doctrines and customs and memories that I might have associated with science? So thank you for watching, thank you for thinking, thank you for questioning, and I will see you in the next video.